Hi everyone, Master P here with the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We are here for another close reading video, and today we're taking a look at an excerpt from In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker. So when we read closely, we are reading actively. We're trying to reveal the layers of meaning below the surface. We're really trying to understand what a writer's position is and what a writer is trying to argue. So going beyond that level of enjoying the writing and getting into really understanding what the writer was attempting to do, hopefully while also enjoying the reading. All right, so we are also trying to better understand a writer's style and also the development of the argument. As we work on this, we're going to need a couple of tools. We will need our copies of the Language of Composition 3rd edition. We'll need our close reading passage handouts. We'll maybe need some highlighters and, of course, something to write with a pen or a pencil. So we always start by thinking about the rhetorical situation, really considering what has shaped this text, whatever text it may be that we're looking at. So thinking about the speaker and the different personas that a person has brought to his or her writing or visual image. We're thinking about the subject matter, and we're also considering the audience. Who is the intended audience? Has this text, was it meant for a specific audience, a general audience, both? What are we thinking? And then how all of that is shaped by a larger context, historical events, contemporary issues. What is the occasion that really sparked the creation of this particular text? And that's how we get to the rhetorical situation. So let's talk about the rhetorical situation for this piece. Alice Walker is a renowned novelist, poet, activist. She has written many, many essays, and this particular essay was part of a collection of works that she wrote between 1966 and 1982. So over a wide period of time. She's a very thoughtful writer, and we'll see how her thoughtfulness comes through in the contemplative mood of this particular piece. So this book, this compilation of essays was published for a general audience, most likely read by people who are educated, most likely read by women, although not necessarily intended for women. So it's a pretty general audience that she wrote this for. And in some ways, we'll see it feels like she almost wrote it for herself. It feels like her writing is an act of discovery, which is a beautiful thing. So the subject matter, she writes about Black women in times of slavery and also the post-Reconstructionist era. She writes about the expression of creativity, the stifling of creativity, and how that stifling affects mental health. So our first step, as always, is to read for understanding. Walker is a very accessible writer. She does refer to a particular poet, and there's a footnote there to help you. But again, we'll see how her thoughtfulness comes through, I think, in this first read. So I'll give you a moment to do that, and I will pause the video so that you can pause as well. All right. So we want to, now that we have an understanding of this passage, we want to think about those overall features, because we're trying to consider how the specific elements affect the larger, how do I say this? How analysis is where we break it apart, right? And we're looking at those small pieces to see how they work together to create the whole. That's what I was trying to say. So we can think about those larger effects like the purpose, the mood, the tone, and Walker's position. So I'm going to refer to my notes here. And what I wrote down as the purpose for this particular section is that Walker is examining the perception of Black women whose creativity was stifled. So she presents in this passage, Jean Toomer's point of view and how that person viewed these women. And so Walker provides us with an alternative point of view. I also said that she, in this section, seems to contemplate legacy. Okay, so for the mood, contemplative, very somber. Her tone toward these women is, of course, incredibly empathetic. And her position is that stifling creativity is harmful to a person's mental health. So let's get into our annotation. So we've read for understanding and possibly annotated for understanding. And now we want to annotate for her style and her argument. So let's switch over to that passage. And we're going to start with her reference to this poet, Jean Toomer. Again, there's a footnote there if you need it. And she says he discovered a curious thing, and she uses this colon to then set us up for a further explanation here. What was this curious thing he discovered? Black women whose spirituality was so intense, so deep, so unconscious. All right, we got this little trifecta of descriptors: intense, deep, unconscious, that they themselves were unaware of the richness they held. They stumbled blindly through their lives. And the use of the word blindly is particularly important here because she really develops, later on we're going to see, this idea of sight, perception, vision. Okay, so this concept or this idea that these women were unable to perceive really what was going on around them because, and here we have a colon that sort of sets us up for this, creatures so abused and mutilated in body, so dimmed and confused by pain that they consider themselves unworthy even of hope. And this is incredibly emotional, right? Here we see Walker really showing us, pitiful is perhaps the wrong word, but we are meant to pity these women and to feel compassionate toward them. And again, I think we can use these words to support the idea that Walker is empathetic toward their experiences. So she says that to the men who used them, and abused them, they were more than even mere women. They became saints. And it's important here that she states this perception of the women is thought of by the men, because she's going to present to us an alternative view. To men, these women's bodies became shrines and their minds became temples suitable for worship. So obviously we've got this religious extended metaphor. These crazy saints stared out in the world wildly like lunatics. This section here we're going to take a look at in the graphic organizer in just a moment. So I'm going to come back to that moment in a second. Who were these saints? These crazy, loony, pitiful women. So again, we have that power of three. And she's using the words that that other people would use to describe them, right? And the rhetorical question obviously makes us as the readers ask ourselves, who were these women? And that's part of this contemplative mood. She wants us to be thinking. And then she hits us with a very personal statement because, it sounds like, okay, we're reading about something that happened in history, And then she says, some of them without a doubt, right, were our mothers and grandmothers. And then we sit back and think, oh, that could be. The use of that word our really reaching out to the audience, and in some ways implying that not just certainly biologically and genetically, some people were related to these women, but also as a society, that use of the word our, I think, includes everyone. that we all have some kind of relationship or duty in a way to think about these women and what they went through. So she says, in the still heat of the post-Reconstruction South, this is how they seem to Jean Toomer: exquisite butterflies trapped in an evil honey. So this metaphor, but again, a metaphor according to this other person, this man. Let me skip to the next page. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me come back here. It says, toiling away their lives, like animals, the implication is animals, that did not acknowledge them. They were living in an era, a century that did not acknowledge them except as the mule of the world. This is a very, again, kind of emotional way of portraying these women and shows Walker's empathy. They dreamed dreams that no one knew, not themselves in any coherent fashion. They wandered or sat about the countryside, crooning lullabies to ghosts and drawing the Mother of Christ in charcoal on the courthouse walls. This imagery is so powerful. And specifically those active verbs, wandering, sat, crooning, drawing, they really get at the gentleness, the gentle spirit of these women to whom incredibly violent things were done. So, to contrast the gentleness of their spirit, they forced their minds to desert their bodies, right? So, in a way, it's like their minds were their power and they forced that power out of themselves. And so, what is left are these very passive actions, these very soft and gentle actions. And that aligns with this simile that she sets up here. That's terrible, sorry. That's a simile. That their striving spirit sought to rise like frail whirlwinds from the hard red clay. And I know she's referring to the clay of the ground, but it also reminds me of pottery. And maybe that's just me, but I think of these women as vessels. And when those whirlwinds fell and scattered particles upon the ground, no one mourned. And again, for me, it just reminds me, or it makes me think of a vessel that's been shattered and what's important inside of it has come out. And this incredibly sad statement that no one mourned. And I think that's part of what Walker is trying to do in a way, is tell their stories. It's not quite mourning their loss, but trying to make people aware of it. Okay, so let's come back to our slides here. And we want to look at our graphic organizer. So we're going to take a look at a specific quotation, and then we're going to paraphrase, put it into our own words, take a look at the rhetorical strategies, consider the effect or function, and then put that into written rhetorical analysis. All right, so the quotation that I selected: these crazy saints stared out at the world wildly like lunatics or quietly like suicides, and the God that was in their gaze was as mute as a great stone. My way of putting that into my own words, I said, these women had expressions ranging from upset and crazy to quiet and disturbed, and what other people saw as something religious was not actually present. So that was one way I put it into my own words. I said, I noticed parallelism, imagery, simile, and then I said the parallel sentence structure equates two responses to what was happening, right? The two responses that they could stare out at the world wildly like lunatics, quietly like suicides. The imagery depicts the women's stares as troubled. And then that made me think, when you think of staring, you think of the eyes. And that made me think of the concept that eyes are the windows to the soul. And then I said the simile, relating their gaze, or the God that was in their gaze as mute as a great stone, connotes a hardness and a permanence. So when I needed to put this together into an actual sentence form, this is what I came up with. I said, Walker calls into question Toomey's that's not right. It should be Toomer's. Sorry. Let's just go fix that. And let's make sure I spelled it correctly. Yep. Okay. Understanding of these women as spiritual saints by describing the women's eyes, a part of the body often cited as the window of the soul. And that should also be a comma. See, this is a really good writing strat. By the way, when you're writing, or I should say when you're done writing, before you submit a final draft of any paper, it's a really good idea to read your work out loud because, as you can see, you'll often catch mistakes that you otherwise wouldn't catch if you're just looking at it on a computer screen. So even better than reading it out loud, I highly suggest printing your work and then reading it out loud from the printed page. For some reason, you'll just catch more mistakes than you would if you read it on the computer screen. So just a writing tip. Okay. Where did we go? So right. A part of the body often cited as the window to the soul. She suggests that these women are not at peace with God, but rather mentally ill, as evidenced by their wild, lunatic, quiet, or suicidal stares. By comparing the God in their gaze to the muteness of a great stone, she contemplates the silence of God in these women's lives and the permanence of the harm done to their souls. So that's what I wrote. And hopefully I would keep going and could turn this analysis into an essay, a well-written essay, where I would analyze the rhetorical strategies Walker uses to convey her position. And of course, if I were responding to this prompt, I would want to first identify the position and then talk about the rhetorical strategies she uses to identify that position. All right, so I just want to say thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your time. And as always, fare thee well, young scholars.